I let my husband take the house, the company, and everything he asked for in the divorce, because what he really took was something he never bothered to look at. My name is Marianne Holt, and for 18 years, I stayed quiet while everyone believed my husband was the successful one, and I was just the woman standing behind him. When he walked away, convinced he had won, he had no idea he had just signed his way into a future he could not escape, and the silence everyone mistook for weakness was the reason I survived. Chapter 1. The Life Everyone Thought I Had. I am sitting at a small kitchen table that fits just 2 chairs, watching the late afternoon light slide across the floor. It is quiet here. No notifications buzzing, no calendar reminders stacked on top of each other, no sense that I am late for something important. This is my life now, calm, contained, and ordinary in the best possible way. People who see me like this sometimes assume I lost everything. They could not be more wrong. A few years ago, everyone thought I had it all. Back then, I lived in a wide, bright house in a manicured suburb where the lawns were trimmed on the same day every week and the school buses ran like clockwork. We lived on a street where neighbors waved but rarely stopped to talk, where everyone knew just enough about everyone else to feel secure and just enough to compare. From the outside, my life looked complete. A successful husband, a healthy child, a home that appeared in holiday cards without effort. I was 44 years old and married to Evan Holt, 47, the Chief Executive Officer of Holt Development Group. If you asked anyone in our circle who Evan was, they would tell you he was driven, visionary, and tireless. He built things: apartment complexes, mixed-use properties, a reputation that traveled faster than he did. People shook his hand a little longer than necessary. They listened when he spoke. They said his name with admiration. If you asked who I was, the answer was simpler. Evan's wife, Lucas's mom, the woman who organized the bake sales and remembered birthdays. I used to be a legal assistant before Lucas was born. I was good at it too. I understood documents, deadlines, and details most people skimmed past. When Evan's business started to grow, it made sense for one of us to step back. I told myself it was a temporary shift, a practical decision. I would keep the household running smoothly so Evan could focus on building something lasting. That temporary decision stretched into years. Lucas was 16 when everything finally began to change. He was tall for his age, thoughtful, and far more observant than most people realized. From the moment he was born, my sense of responsibility narrowed and sharpened. Every choice I made ran through a single filter. Would this protect my child or expose him to harm? Even when I could not articulate my reasons, that instinct guided me. Evan loved Lucas in his own way. He attended important events, made appearances at games when his schedule allowed, and spoke proudly about his son to anyone who would listen. But the daily work of knowing a child, of noticing small shifts in mood or worry, that was mine. Lucas talked to me at night when the house was quiet. He asked questions that had no easy answers. I learned to listen more than I spoke. The Holt family gatherings were louder. Evan's mother, Helen Holt, had a way of filling every room she entered. She was 68, impeccably dressed, and deeply invested in the idea that her son's success reflected her sacrifices. She spoke often about how hard Evan worked, how much pressure he carried, how demanding his responsibilities were. When she addressed me, it was usually in the language of advice. She would say things about how men like Evan needed peace at home, about how a good wife knew when to step back, about how not everyone was cut out for ambition. Her words were always delivered with a tight smile and a hand resting lightly on my arm, as if she were offering kindness. Over time, the message settled in quietly. My role was to support, not to question. I learned how to nod at the right moments. Our social life revolved around Evan's work: fundraisers, networking dinners, community events tied to development projects. The same faces appeared again and again, dressed in variations of confidence and success. Evan moved easily through these spaces. He knew how to speak just long enough to sound insightful and just short enough to remain interesting. That is where Sophia Grant fit in. Sophia was 38 and worked for public relations for Holt Development Group. She was always nearby at events, clipboard in hand or phone pressed to her ear, making sure everything ran smoothly. She laughed easily at Evan's jokes. She knew which donors to greet first. She dressed in a way that drew attention without appearing inappropriate. I noticed her presence long before I had a reason to question it. There were moments when I would start to say something about Lucas or about our home, and the conversation would drift away from me mid-sentence. People turned toward Evan instead, asking about the next project, the next deal. Once, at a charity dinner, I mentioned how difficult it had been to balance school schedules with Evan's travel. Someone interrupted to ask Evan about zoning approvals. My comment dissolved into the air. I smiled anyway. It was easier that way. Easier than appearing needy or resentful. Easier than reminding everyone that the life they admired required unseen labor. The night I first noticed something was off did not feel dramatic at the time. I was sitting at the dining room table with a stack of mail, sorting out what could be recycled and what needed attention. Utility bills, school notices, invitations. My hands moved automatically. I had done this hundreds of times before. Then I saw an envelope from a bank we didn't use for our everyday accounts. I almost tossed it aside. When I opened it, I expected something minor, a promotional notice or a statement sent in error. Instead, it referenced a payment related to our home. Not a large amount, but enough to make me pause. Evan had told me years earlier that the mortgage was nearly paid off. We had discussed how freeing that would feel, how it would give us flexibility. I read the letter twice. The wording didn't match what I thought I knew. It mentioned a balance I didn't recognize. My first reaction was to assume there was a simple explanation, a clerical mistake, an old account that had not been closed properly. I set the letter aside and continued sorting, but my attention kept drifting back to that envelope. Later that night, Evan came home late. He talked about meetings, about traffic, about how exhausting the week had been. I listened, nodded, asked the right questions. The letter stayed where it was, folded neatly on the corner of the table. I thought about bringing it up, about asking casually as if it were nothing, but something held me back, a small voice I had learned to not ignore. I decided to wait until morning. Morning came and went. Lucas needed a ride to school. Evan left early for a site visit. The house returned to its usual quiet rhythm. I picked up the letter again, reading it with more care this time. The details still didn't make sense. I didn't feel panic, not yet. What I felt was a low-level unease, like a sound just outside the range of hearing. I had spent enough years working with documents to know when something deserved attention, and I also knew the difference between asking a question and opening a door you could not close. So I did nothing. I filed the letter away in a folder labeled Household Records. I made a mental note of the bank's name. I told myself I would look into it later when I had more information, when I could be certain of what I was seeing. That night, as I watched Lucas do his homework at the kitchen counter, I studied his face. He was focused, brow slightly furrowed, lips moving as he read silently. I thought about how fragile stability really was, how quickly it could be disrupted by forces you didn't see coming. I went to bed with that thought and lay awake longer than usual. By the next day, the feeling had not gone away. It lingered, quiet but persistent. I had not accused anyone. I had not imagined worst-case scenarios. All I had done was notice. Sometimes that's how everything begins.
Chapter 2. Following the Numbers. The next morning, I drove Lucas to school and watched him disappear into the stream of teenagers moving toward the front doors. He gave me a quick wave without looking back, the way 16-year-olds do when they are trying to act like they do not need you. I sat in the car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel and let the quiet settle around me. The letter from the bank stayed in my mind like a pebble in a shoe, small, constant, and possible to ignore. By the time I got home, the house felt different, not because anything had changed, but because I was looking at it with new eyes. I walked through rooms that were staged for a life we wanted the world to believe in. A spotless kitchen, a living room arranged for guests who rarely came. framed photos of vacations that looked effortless even though I remembered the arguments in rental cars and the tension over money Evan insisted we did not have to think about. I did not start with dramatics, I started with what I knew. When I worked as a legal assistant, my job was to read what other people skipped: fine print, dates, names, patterns. You could learn a lot about someone by what they put in writing, and even more by what they avoided putting in writing. Evan handled most of our finances, but there were still traces in places he could not fully control: mail, tax documents, insurance renewals, statements that arrived when someone forgot to change an address. I pulled the household records folder from the cabinet and placed it on the dining room table. Then I started building a second stack beside it. Anything with a bank name, anything with a loan number, anything that referenced the house. At first, it was just the letter I had already seen. Then I found another envelope from the same bank tucked behind a stack of school paperwork. It was older, dated months back, and addressed to Evan directly. I opened it and felt my stomach tighten. It referenced a balance that had no reason to exist if our mortgage was nearly paid off. I did not know the full story yet, but I recognized the shape of it. A second lien, maybe a home equity line, something layered on top of something else, the kind of thing you did when you needed cash quickly and did not want to admit it. I kept going. I logged into the account we used for household bills, the one Evan allowed me to access so I could pay utilities and keep things running. The numbers looked normal at first glance: the usual grocery charges, Lucas's school fees, a couple of restaurant meals. But then I noticed a pattern in the transfers. Money moved in and out in tight cycles, like someone was patching holes just in time to keep the boat afloat. I wrote down dates and amounts on a yellow legal pad. It felt almost silly, like I was playing detective in my own home, but each line I wrote made the picture sharper. The next step was the house itself. I did not have full access to everything, but I did have enough to request basic information. I used the county website to search property records. It was not hard, most of it is public if you know where to look. I typed in our address and waited for the results to load. When they appeared, my throat went dry. There were multiple filings attached to our property, not just the original mortgage, additional liens recorded later. I clicked one, then another. The dates stretched across years. The names on the documents were consistent. Evan Holt. Not Marianne Holt, not both of us, just Evan. For a moment I felt relief so sharp it almost hurt. Then the relief twisted into something else, because even if my name was not there, it meant he had been doing this without me, taking pieces of our life and signing them away in private, while I was packing lunches and buying birthday gifts and smiling at fundraisers. I kept reading. The amounts were not all listed in full, but there were enough clues to tell me this was not a single mistake, it was a system. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Then I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against the table as if I could steady myself that way. I did not cry, I did not scream, I did not call anyone. I made coffee, drank it cold, and went back to work. Over the next week I moved carefully, the way you do when you suspect there is broken glass on the floor. I watched the mail like it was a living thing. I noticed which envelopes were missing, which ones appeared already opened, which ones were redirected. I found a small change of address confirmation folded into a drawer near the kitchen, the kind of paper most people would throw away. It listed a post office box. Evan's handwriting was on it. So that is what he had done. He did not stop the mail, he simply rerouted it. I took a photo of the paper with my phone and put it back exactly where I found it. Meanwhile, Evan's public life grew brighter. One afternoon, I picked Lucas up from school and the radio was playing an interview with Evan. His voice was confident, warm, almost charming. He talked about revitalizing the community, about creating opportunities, about responsible growth. The host laughed at his jokes. Evan spoke as if he were the kind of man who had everything under control. Lucas looked up from his phone and said, "Dad sounds like he's running for office." I forced a small laugh and kept my eyes on the road. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. That night, Evan came home carrying a glossy folder with the Holt Development Group logo embossed on the front. He was energized in a way that used to make me proud. Now it made me wary. "We have a meeting with the bank tomorrow," he said, and he kissed my forehead like everything was normal. "What kind of meeting?" I asked. "Just routine," he said. "Better terms, better structure, you know how it is." I did know how it was. I knew exactly how it was, and I did not like it. The following evening, Evan sat at the kitchen counter with his laptop open and a stack of papers spread out. Sophia Grant stood just inside the doorway for a moment, holding her phone, speaking quietly as if she was on speaker with someone else. When Evan noticed me, he motioned her away with a quick gesture. She left without looking at me. Evan tapped a pen at the top sheet and said he needed my signature. I walked closer and looked down at the document. My heart thumped once hard, like my body was warning me before my brain caught up. The heading was full of safe-sounding words: authorization, consent, acknowledgement. It did not say loan, it did not say debt, it did not say mortgage. It said restructuring, family asset management, updated banking relationship. It also had a section for a cosigner. Evan smiled as if he were offering me a simple errand. "It's nothing," he said. "They just want it on file that you know we're updating the structure. It's standard." I picked up the paper and scanned it the way I used to scan contracts at work. Slow, methodical, looking for the sentence that changes everything. I found it halfway down. A line that implied shared responsibility. A line that would turn his private problem into ours. The room felt too warm. I could hear the refrigerator hum. I could hear Evan's pen tapping again, faster now. I looked up at him and tried to keep my voice steady. "What exactly is this for?" He leaned back slightly, annoyance flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. "I told you, better terms, better rates. It's just paperwork." I thought about Lucas upstairs, headphones on, trying to finish homework. I thought about the liens with Evan's name on them. I thought about how quickly a signature could erase the only thin line of protection I still had. I did not accuse him. I did not ask questions that would reveal what I knew. I chose something simpler. "I can't do this tonight," I said. "Lucas has that early meeting tomorrow, and I promised I would look over his schedule with him. If it's important, I want to read it properly when I'm not distracted." His jaw tightened. "Marianne, it's just a form." I held the paper in both hands and kept my expression neutral. "Then send it to me and I will read it tomorrow. If it's standard, there's no rush." He stared at me for a beat too long. Then he reached out and took the document back, a little too sharply. "Fine, tomorrow," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. That night I did not sleep much, not because I was spiraling in fear, but because my mind was working. This was the moment that confirmed everything I needed to know. Evan wanted my name on his structure. He wanted my signature attached to whatever he had built in secret. And if he wanted that now, it meant he was running out of room. The next morning, I dropped Lucas off and sat in the car again, watching the school doors swallow him up. My phone buzzed with a notification from a local news site. Evan's face appeared on the screen, smiling beside a headline about community growth and leadership. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I understood something then, with a clarity that made me feel almost cold. If I confronted Evan, he would not confess. He would adjust. He would move faster. He would hide deeper. He would make sure the next time I saw the truth, it would be too late for me to protect Lucas or myself. So I did what I had been trained to do long before I became anyone's wife. I collected information, I made notes, I kept copies, I stayed calm. And I decided I would not speak until I could see the whole map.
Chapter 3. The quiet work no one sees. Seeing the whole map meant I had to treat my own life like a case file. Not in a dramatic way, not with cork boards and string, but with the kind of quiet discipline that keeps you from making a mistake you cannot undo. I started with what was still mine. My IRA was in my name, and it had been that way long before Evan's company started making headlines. I logged into the account at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold while I read every line. No new beneficiaries, no strange withdrawals, no unexpected address changes. I printed the statements anyway, then folded them into a plain envelope and wrote a single word on the front in black ink: retirement. The inheritance was harder to look at, not because it was complicated, but because it came from someone who had loved me without conditions. Margaret Lane, my grandmother, had been gone for years, but her voice still lived in my memory. She used to say that a woman should never confuse peace with safety, and she said it like she had learned it the hard way. The money she left me had been deposited into an account I kept separate, one Evan knew existed but never asked about because he had always acted like it did not matter. I checked it anyway. I confirmed the paper trail. I pulled bank statements going back years and made sure there was no commingling, no transfers in and out that could be questioned later. I did not need to be paranoid, I needed to be precise. Then I found a place for it all. At first, I considered a safe deposit box, but that felt too obvious, like a move you make when you want someone to notice you are protecting something. Instead, I did something simpler. I asked my friend Linda Perez to hold a sealed envelope for me. Linda was 45, the kind of neighbor who brought soup when you were sick and never asked for details. We met through school volunteering, and our friendship was built on shared exhaustion and the comfort of someone who did not perform. I invited her over on a Saturday afternoon while Lucas was out with friends. I handed her the envelope and watched her eyebrows lift. "What is this, Marianne?" "Nothing exciting," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "Just copies of some documents. I need them somewhere that is not my house." Linda did not pry. She simply nodded once, like she understood more than I had said. "Do you want me to open it?" "No," I said quickly. "Just keep it somewhere safe. If I ever ask for it, please give it to me right away." Linda tucked it into her bag. Then she leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to let the words spill out and feel someone else carry part of the weight. But I was still building the map, and I was not ready to reveal what I did not fully understand. "I will be," I said. "I just need to be careful." That was the closest I came to asking for help. The next step was legal. Rachel Moore's office was downtown, above a coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso. The waiting room was quiet, not the soft quiet of comfort, but the controlled quiet of people who had seen too much. A receptionist handed me a clipboard and I filled in basic information without writing anything I did not want to explain later. Rachel was 52, sharp-eyed, and dressed in a simple suit that looked expensive because it fit perfectly. She shook my hand and studied me the way a good attorney studies a witness. "Tell me what brings you here," she said. I sat down and placed a folder on her desk. It held copies of the liens and the bank letter, nothing more. "My husband has debts I did not know about," I said. "I need to understand my exposure." Rachel flipped through the pages without changing her expression. Then she set them down and looked at me. "How long have you been aware of this?" "A few weeks," I said. "And how long has it been going on?" "I do not know yet." Rachel leaned back slightly. "Marianne, I'm going to be direct. If you've been married 18 years, a lot of things can be considered marital, even if you did not sign every document. It depends on facts, and it depends on how things were handled. If you're coming in late, there may already be damage." I kept my face calm. I had expected this. "I'm not asking you for comfort, I'm asking you for clarity." Rachel's mouth tightened in a way that looked almost like approval. "All right," she said. "What do you want to know?" I asked the questions I had rehearsed while washing dishes and folding laundry. Not vague questions, specific ones. "What happens if he tries to get me to sign something now?" "Don't sign anything you don't understand. Don't sign under pressure," Rachel said. "What about the house?" Rachel tapped the lien printout with her finger. "These filings are in his name," she said. "That matters. But you need to know whether you ever signed anything at closing, any refinances, any home equity documents. Sometimes people sign without reading. Sometimes spouses are required to sign acknowledgments. We need to know what exists." "My retirement account is in my name, and I have an inheritance that never touched our joint accounts. Is that separate?" Rachel's eyes sharpened. This was the first time she looked fully engaged. "Did you ever transfer any of it into a joint account?" she asked. "No," I said, "never."
Did you ever use it for joint expenses, mortgage payments, anything like that? No. Rachel nodded slowly. That's good, she said. That's very good. Separate property can stay separate if you keep it clean, but you have to keep it clean. I swallowed. The phrase landed like a warning. What about custody? I asked. My son is 16. I want stability for him. Rachel's expression softened by a fraction.
Courts care about the child's best interest, she said. At 16, his voice matters more than people think. But stability is not just emotional, it is also practical. Where he lives, school, routines, we need to be smart. When I stood to leave, Rachel held my gaze. You are holding back, she said. I did not answer. She continued anyway. If you are planning something, do it legally, she said. Do not play games. The court does not reward cleverness if it looks like deception. I'm not trying to trick anyone, I said. Rachel watched me for a beat, then nodded. Good, she said. Then keep doing what you are doing. Quiet, documented, clean. Outside her office, the air felt colder than it had when I walked in. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. I did not feel brave, I felt focused. The weeks that followed were filled with small acts of normal life that felt like disguises. I packed Lucas's lunch, I attended a school meeting, I smiled at Evan's colleagues, I folded laundry while my mind ran through documents like a playlist. Evan kept moving through the world like a man untouched by consequences. One evening, he came home and dropped a local business magazine on the counter. They ran a profile on me, he said, smiling. I glanced at the cover. His photo was polished, confident. Holt Development Group was printed beneath his name in bold letters. That is nice, I said. He watched me. You seem tired lately, he said. I am, I said. Lucas has been busy, school is busy. Evan nodded like that explanation satisfied him. Then he kissed my cheek and went upstairs. At a networking event a few days later, I crossed paths with Daniel Price, the company's chief financial officer. He was 49, the kind of man who always looked like he was thinking 2 steps ahead, even when he was holding a plate of hors d'oeuvres. He greeted Evan first, then turned to me with a polite smile. Marianne, he said, how are you holding up? I blinked. The question sounded ordinary, but the way he said it felt pointed. Fine, I said, just busy. Daniel's eyes flicked toward Evan, who was laughing with a group of donors a few feet away. Then Daniel lowered his voice. These are interesting times, he said. A lot of people think real estate is just about confidence. They forget it's also about timing. I held his gaze. Timing for what? I asked quietly. Daniel's smile stayed in place, but it did not reach his eyes. Audits, he said softly. Interest rates. Lenders getting nervous. You know, details. I felt my pulse jump. Evan walked back toward us, and Daniel's posture shifted instantly back into casual. We were just saying you are becoming a bit of a local celebrity, Daniel said, loudly, clapping Evan on the shoulder. Evan grinned. It's good for business, he said. Daniel nodded and drifted away. I stood there with the taste of his words in my mouth. Audits, lenders getting nervous, details. Time was not just passing, it was closing in. That weekend, Helen Holt came over for dinner. She arrived with a dessert from a bakery across town and the kind of energy that fills a room whether you want it or not. She kissed Evan on the cheek and barely touched my shoulder with her hand. During dinner, she praised Evan's work, the magazine profile, the fundraiser. Then she turned her attention to me. Evan carries so much, she said. It takes a special kind of woman to understand that. Some women make everything about themselves. Evan chuckled as if it were harmless. I kept my face neutral and cleared plates. Helen continued, voice sweet. I always told Evan, choose a woman who knows how to be grateful, a woman who knows that a good marriage means sacrifice. For a moment, something inside me wavered, not because she was right, but because I had lived under that language for so long, it had shaped the walls of my thinking. I looked at Lucas, who was quietly eating, eyes down. I thought about what sacrifice had meant in this family. It had meant silence. That night, after Helen left, Evan found me in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. You were quiet, he said. I was tired, I said. He stepped closer. You know my mom, he said. She means well. I nodded once. Evan's voice dropped, and the warmth disappeared. Listen, he said, we should talk soon. About us. My hands stilled on a plate. About what? I asked. Evan exhaled like he was annoyed that I didn't already understand. About simplifying, he said. This whole thing. It doesn't need to be complicated. I turned to face him. His eyes were flat, practical, like he was looking at a project that no longer fit his plan. I want a divorce, he said, and I want it handled quickly, cleanly, no drama. The kitchen felt suddenly too bright. I could hear Lucas moving upstairs, the faint thud of footsteps. My body reacted before my mind did, a flash of heat in my chest, a tightening in my throat. Then something else followed, a calm that surprised even me. Evan watched my face closely like he was measuring how much resistance he would have to fight through. I did not give him what he expected. I set the plate down, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and looked at him steadily. Okay, I said. Evan blinked just once. Okay, he repeated, slower. I nodded. We'll do it properly, I said, for Lucas. Evan's mouth tightened, as if the word properly irritated him. We'll do it my way, he said. I did not argue, I did not plead, I did not ask why. I watched him turn and walk out of the kitchen, already acting like the decision was finished. When I finally went upstairs, Lucas was in his room, headphones on, studying. He looked up when I knocked. You all right? He asked. I forced a small smile. I'm fine, I said, just tired. Keep working. He nodded, trusting me the way children do until the day they can't. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. My hands were steady, my breathing was steady, my mind was moving faster than ever. This was not the moment everything fell apart. This was the moment the plan stopped being theoretical.
Chapter 4. Giving him what he asked for. Reality has a way of sharpening every sound. The click of Evan's shoes on the hardwood, the low hum of the printer as it spat out forms, Lucas's footsteps overhead when he tried to pretend he was not listening. In the days after Evan said the word divorce, the house still looked the same, but it felt like a staged set. Everything was familiar, and none of it belonged to me anymore. Evan moved fast. He liked fast. Fast meant control. He texted me the next morning like he was confirming a meeting time. Thursday at 10, Rachel can come if you want. I want this handled quickly. I read the message twice. The first time, my stomach tightened. The second time, I remembered Rachel's face in her office, the way she looked at me like she was measuring my discipline. I called Rachel from my car in the school pickup line. I need to schedule mediation, I said. Rachel did not ask how I was doing. She asked what Evan had proposed. Quick and clean usually means one person is hiding something, she said. Do you have copies of the property filings and the new paperwork he wanted you to sign? I do, I said. Good, she said. Bring everything. And Marianne, do not talk about strategy in writing, not texts, not emails. Keep it simple. At home, I built a folder that looked boring on purpose, not thick, not dramatic, not the kind of thing that made people curious. Inside were the lean printouts, a few bank notices, and a list I made for myself of what I would say out loud and what I would not. Lucas watched me from the kitchen doorway while I worked. Are you and Dad fighting? He asked. I kept my eyes on the paper. We are having grown-up conversations, I said. It is not your job to fix anything. He hesitated. Are we moving? He asked. The question landed in my chest. I looked up at him and saw what I had been avoiding, not just his worry, but his effort to be strong for me. Not right away, I said, and whatever happens, you stay steady. School stays steady. Your life stays steady. That is my job. He nodded once, like he was trying to believe me. Then he walked back upstairs, and I listened to his door close. 2 days later, we sat in a conference room that smelled faintly of old coffee and new carpet. Evan arrived first,
dressed like he was going to a meeting with investors. He smiled at the mediator, shook hands, and barely looked at me. When Rachel and I walked in, Evan's gaze flicked to Rachel, then back to me with a slight narrowing, like he did not like that I had brought someone who might slow him down. Rachel shook his hand politely. "Mr. Holt," she said. "Evan," he corrected, as if friendliness would make the process easier for him. We sat across from him. The mediator spoke in a calm voice about cooperation, fairness, the goal of minimizing conflict. Evan nodded as if he had written the script himself. When it was Evan's turn to speak, he did not talk about feelings. He talked about efficiency. "I built the company," he said. "I want to keep it intact. I want to keep the house. I do not want this to be messy." Rachel's pen moved quietly over her notepad. I kept my hands folded in my lap. The mediator turned to me. "Marianne, what are you hoping for?" she asked. I had rehearsed this, not as a performance, but as a shield. I let my shoulders drop slightly. I let my face look tired. "I want stability for Lucas," I said. "I want this to be calm. I do not want us dragging this out for months." Evan's eyes sharpened. He was listening now. Rachel leaned forward just enough to be present, not enough to take over. "The child is 16, Rachel said. "He needs a consistent schedule. He needs to stay in his school. He needs predictability." Evan nodded quickly, like he had been expecting that and was ready to concede it. "Fine," he said, "we can do a schedule, but I am not paying for her to live the same lifestyle. She does not need that." He said it casually, like I was a line item. The mediator asked about assets. Evan slid a folder across the table. It was thick, polished, prepared. He had always been good at presenting what he wanted people to see. He spoke about the house like it was proof of his success. He spoke about Holt Development Group like it was his identity. Then he said it. "I want everything tied to the company and the property. I will take responsibility for it. That is fair. She can take her personal stuff and a small cash settlement so she can get started." Rachel's eyes lifted to mine for a fraction of a second, then dropped again. Neutral. Controlled. If anyone was watching her, they would see nothing. The mediator looked at me. "Marianne," she said, "do you have a response?" This was the moment where most people would argue, most people would panic, most people would try to reclaim dignity by demanding more than they understood. I did not. "I want a small amount in cash," I said, "enough to move and get settled. And I want the parenting plan in writing. Clear days, clear holidays. Lucas needs to know what week looks like." Evan blinked. "That is it?" he asked. I nodded. Rachel added gently, "We will also need confirmation that Mrs. Holt is not assuming liability for any business debts or lending instruments. Everything associated with Holt Development Group, property lines, and credit facilities remains solely with Mr. Holt." Evan's mouth tightened. The words sounded technical. The mediator scribbled notes. Evan's attorney, a man with a practiced smile, leaned forward. "Why would Marianne need that?" he asked. "If she is taking cash and leaving the company and the property to Evan, that is implied." Rachel's voice stayed calm. "It is best practice to be explicit," she said. "It avoids confusion later." Evan stared at me again. His confidence wavered just slightly, like a chair leg that is not as sturdy as it looks. He had expected anger. He had expected negotiations. He had expected me to show my hand. Instead, I was giving him what he asked for, and it made him suspicious. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Marianne," he said, and his voice lowered. "What are you doing? This is not like you." The mediator lifted a hand. "Mr. Holt, we will keep our tone respectful," she said. Evan sat back, but his eyes stayed locked on me. Rachel turned a page in her notepad as if she had all the time in the world. I focused on breathing evenly. "I am tired," I said quietly. "I do not want to fight. I want Lucas to be okay. I want to stop living in constant stress." It was not a lie, it was simply not the whole truth. Evan's attorney cleared his throat. "If Marianne is comfortable with that framework, we can draft terms. We will also need to address any accounts in her name." Rachel nodded once. Mrs. Holt has separate property, she said, an IRA in her name, a separate inheritance account that has never been commingled with marital funds. We will provide documentation as needed, and those remain hers. Evan's face flickered. Just a moment, a small crack. He knew the inheritance existed, but he had always dismissed it like it was a footnote. Hearing it described as protected, clean, separate, did something to him. He was calculating, and I could see he did not like what he was calculating. His attorney leaned in and whispered something to him. Evan shook his head sharply, then forced a smile. "Fine," he said, "keep it. I do not want her retirement. I want this done." Rachel's eyes stayed down, but I felt the shift in the room. The mediator seemed surprised that there was so little conflict. Evan's attorney looked relieved. Evan looked annoyed. He wanted a win he could see. He did not realize the win he was grabbing came with a weight strapped to it. The rest of the meeting moved quickly. Parenting schedule, school holidays, transportation, a cash number Evan offered, low enough to insult me if I had been there to compete, high enough to look generous to anyone watching from the outside. I accepted it with a nod and asked for a timeline. Rachel asked for one more statement to be included in the agreement, clear and unambiguous, that Evan would retain sole responsibility for the debts, liens, and credit instruments associated with the company and any property in his name. She used simple words, not dramatic, just clean. Evan agreed too fast. When we stepped out into the hallway, Evan caught up to me near the elevator. Rachel stayed a few feet behind, giving us space without leaving me alone. Evan kept his voice low. "You are making this easy," he said. "Why?" I looked at him, at the man who had built a public image out of confidence and control, at the man who had tried to put a paper in front of me and call it standard. "I am making it stable," I said, "for Lucas." Evan searched my face, trying to find the angle, the hidden motive, the threat. He found nothing he could name. He exhaled, almost a laugh. "Good," he said, "then we are done." He walked away like he had won a deal. In the parking lot, Rachel finally spoke. "You did well," she said. "You stayed consistent." I kept my eyes on the cars passing at the edge of the lot. "I was suspicious," I said. Rachel nodded. "People get suspicious when they expect a fight and don't get one. We have to keep everything clean. No gloating, no sudden moves. Let the paperwork do what it is designed to do." I swallowed. "Do you understand what he just took on?" I asked. Rachel looked at me then, and for the first time her neutral expression softened into something that felt like respect. "I do," she said quietly. That was all she needed to say. The next week, Evan's mother called me. Helen's voice was bright, satisfied. "I heard you are being reasonable," she said. "That is good. That is what a decent woman does. Evan deserves peace after everything he has carried." I stood in my kitchen and listened. Helen continued, "I told everyone at the fundraiser that you are handling it gracefully, not like some women who try to take a man for everything he has. You will be fine. You will land on your feet. And Evan will keep the house. He should." I thanked her in a voice that sounded like mine, even though my hands were cold. After I hung up, I looked around the kitchen. The countertops, the cabinets, the family photos, the life I had built around someone else's plans. If anyone had asked me that day what I was getting out of the divorce, the honest answer would sound too simple. I was getting out. That night, Lucas and I ate dinner at the table without Evan. He texted that he was working late. Lucas poked at his food and glanced at me. "Is Dad moving out?" he asked. "Not yet, but things will change soon," I said. He nodded, quiet. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "I'm going to be okay," I said. And for the first time in weeks, I believed it without forcing myself. When I went to bed, I lay in the dark and listened to the house settling around me. I could feel how close we were to the point of no return. The agreement was being drafted. The signatures would come next. The story everyone else thought they understood was about to take its final shape. I did not feel victorious, I felt steady, and I did not feel afraid of what came after. What came after arrived quietly. the way consequences often do when no one is trying to perform them. The agreement was finalized without drama. Signatures were added, copies were exchanged, and the house that once felt permanent became a transitional space. Evan moved out first, taking suits and electronics and the confidence of a man who believed he had secured his future. I stayed just long enough to pack what Lucas and I needed, not rushing, not lingering. When we left, I closed the door behind us without looking back. At first, nothing seemed different. Evan continued to post photos online, smiling at events, standing beside people who still believed his story. Holt Development Group released a few optimistic updates, carefully worded, professionally polished. From the outside, it looked like a man stepping into the next phase of his life with momentum intact. Then the cracks started to show. It began with small things: a lender pulling out of a deal, a project delayed with no clear explanation. I heard about it secondhand, through the same social channels that had once celebrated Evan. People spoke more quietly now, their praise edged with uncertainty. Lucas noticed before I did. One afternoon, as we were unpacking boxes in our new place, he looked up from his phone. "Someone at school said Dad's company might be in trouble," he said carefully. I set a plate into a cabinet and took a breath. "Adults talk. Not all of it is true," I said. He nodded, accepting the answer for now. I did not elaborate. I did not need to. Within months, the story changed again. An audit that had been postponed could not be delayed any longer. Credit tightened, interest rates shifted in ways that punished anyone who had been relying on constant refinancing. The weight Evan had taken on in the settlement began to pull him under, not all at once, but steadily. I did not follow the details closely. I did not need to. The signs reached me anyway, carried by the same network that once admired him. Sophia Grant disappeared from the public side of the business first. Her name stopped appearing in press releases. Her presence vanished from events. When someone mentioned her in passing, it was with a shrug, as if she had simply moved on to the next opportunity. Whatever had existed between Evan and Sophia dissolved under the pressure of reality. Image only matters when there is something left to protect. Helen Holt's transformation was quieter. The woman who once held court at fundraisers and spoke confidently about her son's accomplishments began to withdraw. Invitations stopped coming. People who had once leaned in to hear her opinions started to look past her. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she had resigned from a board she used to boast about, citing health reasons. She never called me again. At first, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, not joy, not triumph, just the recognition that something had shifted in the world's balance. Then even that feeling faded. Karma did not arrive with fireworks. It arrived with silence, with absence, with the slow erosion of certainty. Meanwhile, my life took shape in smaller, sturdier ways. The house Lucas and I moved into was modest, tucked into a neighborhood where people parked on the street and waved without pretense. It had creaky floors and windows that let in too much light in the morning. It was not impressive, but it was safe. Lucas adjusted faster than I expected. He decorated his room with posters and stacked books along the wall. He complained about the internet speed and asked if we could get a dog someday. He started talking again, really talking, about school, about friends, about his plans after graduation. The tension he had carried for so long loosened, and I realized how much he had been holding in without knowing how to name it. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, he leaned his head against my shoulder. "You seem different," he said. "In a good way?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, "like you are not waiting for something bad to happen." I smiled into his hair. "That's because I'm not anymore," I said. There were moments when doubt crept in, quiet and insistent. Late at night, when the house was still, I would replay the past in my mind. I would ask myself if I had been too cold, too calculated, if there had been another path that ended with less damage. I thought about Evan, about the version of him I once loved, about the years when we built something together that felt real. I wondered if my silence had been cruel. Then I thought about the documents he placed in front of me and called standard. I thought about the mail he rerouted. I thought about the way he looked at me when he asked for my signature, confident that I would give it to him without question. I did not feel guilty after that. Protecting yourself is not revenge. Protecting your child is not malice. It's responsibility. Rachel called me once, months after everything had settled. "Everything still clean on your end? No exposure, no surprises?" I thanked her and hung up, feeling the last thread of tension loosen inside my chest. The legal chapter of my life was closed. The story had reached its end on paper, even if the emotional echoes would take longer to fade. I did not track Evan's decline. I did not read articles or ask questions. When his name came up, I let it pass through me without taking root. My work was here, in the quiet, in the ordinary days that no longer felt fragile. Sometimes people still assume I lost everything. They look at my smaller house, my simpler life, and they see absence. They do not see freedom. They do not see sleep without anxiety. They do not see a teenage boy who laughs easily again, or a woman who trusts her own instincts. Silence changed my life. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of restraint, the kind that buys you time to see clearly, to choose carefully, to step out of a story that was written to trap you. If you've ever stayed quiet because speaking too soon would have cost you everything, I want you to know something. That silence does not make you weak. It means you were paying attention. It means you were protecting something that mattered. And sometimes, that's the strongest move you'll ever make.